It is great to be here with you today, especially on Mother's Day. I let my kids, well, one of my kids sleep in, but the other one got here super early with me. As you probably know, I have been doing my field study internship at St. Mark's Altadena, and I am now a couple of months into my clinical pastoral education placement at San Antonio Regional Hospital in Upland. It is a privilege to serve as a hospital chaplain, to meet with patients and family members during a time of incredible stress and vulnerability. I have been honored to witness people taking steps to discern their vocation for ministry in the wake of chronic diagnoses. So many patients have welcomed me in conversation and prayer and allowed me to hold space for their grief, fear, uncertainty, and occasionally joy. But chaplaincy is also incredibly difficult. As an interfaith chaplain, I attempt to respect the faith practice and theology of every patient and ask the people how I can pray for them. It might seem counterintuitive, but the spiritual care encounters that I find the most draining are not the ones where the patient is clearly dying and the family is asking me for some version of last rites that can be performed by a non-ordained person, sometimes in Spanish. The hardest care encounters are the ones where a patient tells me that they know that God can heal them if they have sufficient faith. And they ask me to pray for a total cure of their ailment, especially when it is evident that their ailment is complicated by systemic factors of injustice, by insufficient income, insurance, housing, and social support. As a chaplain, it's not my job to argue with anyone's theology, but it breaks my heart to pray carefully worded appeals for God's life-giving presence, abundant mercy, steadfast love, and incomprehensible peace, while seeing evidence of the human systems that make it difficult for all people to access health and dignity equally, the poor as well as the rich. Also, I'm just not comfortable with the theology of faith healing that suggests that God can do miraculous things for people who have sufficient faith, because there is always the unspoken worry that when God does not do miraculous things, it's because of some deep sin or defect on our part. And I just don't want to believe in a God who has that kind of character, who decides who is and who is not worthy of a miraculous cure. On its face, the story that we have this morning from Acts, where Peter resuscitates Tabitha, might seem like a simple narrative of demonstrating how in the years after the death, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus, the apostles took up his ministry and through the power of the Holy Spirit, shared God's awesome gifts of healing, restoration, and resurrection as signs of God's glory. It's tempting to take the story literally. The church of my youth certainly did. But it may be worthwhile to sift a little deeper for meaning about what the story might reveal about the nature and character of God. To me, the widows are a clue that the story is a trifle subversive, at least of our expectations. As a reader on this side of 2,000 years of power, politics, and religion getting all tangled up, and of the church tending to undervalue or outright suppress the ministry of women, I feel genuine surprise when I read the narrative and reflect that Peter traveled to Joppa to visit and hopefully heal a woman whose ministry was focused on the widows of the town. It's especially great that we have this reading today on Mother's Day. Tabitha's mourning party did not include powerful people. And Peter did not respond to the call of political power in rushing to Joppa. Peter responded to love. Peter followed the example of Jesus, our Good Shepherd. As a fiber artist, I love the mention of the widows at Tabitha's house, incorporating a show and tell of the garments that she made for each of them as part of their grieving process. I was reminded of the altar hangings and linens made by generations of people in this church and carefully preserved by our altar guild. Among my most prized possessions are a bracelet made for me by Deirdre Duke, a longtime member of this church who passed away 5 years ago, and a beautiful quilt made by Susie Carrion. I imagine you all also have treasured artifacts in your homes made by the people you loved. And I wonder if you also feel a small pang of grief and an enormous swell of love when you see these tangible expressions of their love for you. So, if I was in that house in Joppa, you can be certain that I would be standing right there with the widows, proudly holding up a garment made in the spirit of love and generosity and celebrating its beauty. I would like to think that I always possess Peter's capacity for action, fueled by hope and love. But all too often, I end up feeling overwhelmed by the vast need present in the world and paralyzed by uncertainty about how best to move forward. Overwhelm and paralysis have marked my responses to the executive orders and casual cruelty of this administration. I have watched and grieved as the administration has dismantled foreign and domestic aid necessary for the preservation of so many lives, and has taken pains to circumvent or outright ignore the rule of law and the constitutional rights of all people, while taking a draconian stance to the potential civil infractions of certain groups of people, people who write op-eds at odds with the administration's opinions, perhaps, people who have tattoos or wear Chicago Bulls jerseys. The need in this world is so great. And sometimes I get lost in thinking that if I can't fix it all, then I'm not doing it right. So I get tired and I withdraw from my community. And it turns out that I have more in common with Tabitha, lying still on the bed, surrounded by a community, yet unable to engage in the moment. But there have been plenty of people in my life in the last 4 months and in the last 10 years who have reached out to me to pull me out of my isolation and called me to get up, to go out, to keep doing my part. Lately, I have felt that call from the parishioners at St. Mark's, who responded to the loss of their church building and so many of their homes by gathering together, sharing information and expertise, holding one another in grief, and encouraging one another to find joy in community. I have felt that call from each of you, coming together every week to seek the nourishment and inspiration you need to continue your daily ministry in the world. All of these people have reminded me that no one fixes all of the problems of the world by themselves. But each of us, working together in community, can participate in God's miraculous work in the world. Thanks be to God.